It's a Whistleblowers Town Hall. You're going to be hearing from James O'Keefe. He's the founder. Yeah, you can clap. Go ahead, clap. So James O'Keefe is the founder of Project Veritas, and it's an investigative journalism organization, and he has with him a group of courageous whistleblowers you may recognize from big tech and big media.
Yeah.
Yes. And please silence your cell phone, and then for questions, you would have gotten a form to ask a question. You can pass them to your left, down to the end of this aisle. They're going to be picking them up in a few minutes and then answering questions at the end. So make sure you get that written down and pass on to the end as soon as possible. Thank you. Enjoy.
I'm going to stand up here. Hello, everyone. I'm James O'Keefe, Project Veritas. These are all great to be here in South Dakota. This crew has been traveling around a bit, and we have a new whistleblower with us today, David Johnson from Hasbro. And Ivory Hecker. There's Ivory Hecker from Fox 26. So we are going around the country on kind of a tour here, recruiting other people inside societies, institutions with the tagline, "Be brave, do something." And we have CNN, Google, the Postal Service, CBS Detroit, Hasbro Toys, Pinterest, Fox 26, and there's going to be hundreds of these people across the country. It's going to be amazing. So, what we're going to do, we have about 40 minutes here. We're going to go around and let each of these brave souls say a few words, 3 to 5 minutes, about who they are, what they've done, and any other comment. And then we'll talk a little about what happened with David, because just this morning, as we're walking into this stage, Hasbro is attacking David and attacking Project Veritas in a kind of Orwellian way, saying that we edited things, and we don't edit anything out of context of Project Veritas. But they have nothing to say, so they attack us. He exposed racial comments in the company, and they're accusing us of racism. So it's just like George Orwell 1984 is what we have to deal with every day. But let me start with Carrie Porch, brave CNN insider, recorded CEO, president of CNN, Jeff Zucker, and many other things. You all know the CNN tapes that we released this year were just huge. Led to the suspension of Project Veritas for quoting Charlie Chester at CNN, saying that CNN is a political operation designed to help Biden, and get Trump out, to quote the control room guy at CNN, saying fear sells at CNN, that we have fear, and we don't say these things out loud. So, Carrie Porch, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dennis. All right, how are we doing in South Dakota? This is a beautiful state. Any of you guys that are local, we are just having an amazing time here. Went to Mount Rushmore last night as a team, and this is definitely God's country. This is amazing scenery. The pictures don't do it justice at all. But I started working at CNN in 2017. Full disclosure, I went there as a registered Democrat and a leftist. I campaigned for Bernie in the 2016 election. I know this is Freedom Fest. We usually don't care who you vote for. We just want the freedom, right? That's where we're at. So my very first job in there was Charlottesville when all that stuff went down. And I was there and I saw it live, like the actual speech from Trump. And keep in mind, at the time, I was not a fan. But I saw the speech, the good people on both sides, but not the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis. I saw that. Then a few days later, I saw what my bosses cut the last 30 seconds out and just said the good people on both sides. That, to me, was the first antenna raising that there's something not quite right here. And that led to a basically 1.5, almost 2-year journey down the rabbit hole to like really kind of find out what the truth is, left, right, or center. Then I found this man at CPAC in 2019 where I was actually working for CNN. I was covering it. And at that time, I was at the end of my ropes and I wanted to do something to protect the Republic. And just, the spirit welled up inside me like I have to do something. And I came and found this man, had a discussion. We basically talked for about a month or so before I decided to record. Because think about it. He and I both had a lot to lose if neither one of us was on the level, right? So then something happened at work, and I started recording for about 6 to 7 months. October 2019, we released the tapes. Got Jeff Zucker saying, "Hey, don't go after news. All we want is impeachment. Go after this, this, this. I don't care about the other news." That's not what news is supposed to be. That's not why I went to CNN. I wanted to give the public the news for you guys to make up your own decision, and that clearly was the case at CNN. Facts first, the most trusted name in news. Not quite. And we released the tapes, apparently blew up really well. And then here we are trying to recruit the next class of insiders. So it's going to double or triple this in the next couple of years or a couple months, actually. Thank you so much.
So, Kerry really was so brave because he every time that one of these guys comes out, there's a dozen more people within the institution like him. And we got the dial-in for the Jeff Zucker conference call and recorded it. It was amazing. So, and we're gonna do this, and then afterwards we'll do Q&A. So then you guys think of your questions. Next insider, Zach Voorhees, very brave man because he worked for Google, and had some powerful information. One of the slides, which we'll show, it said that they have algorithmic unfairness at Google. That means that even if the facts are factually accurate, we'll censor them because the truth can be unfair. And it's a theme we're seeing in all the tech companies. Facebook, Morgan Common, who couldn't be here today, they had vaccine hesitancy rankings. So even if it's factually accurate, we're going to censor it, and we do not want the public to know. Zach, say a few words.
Yeah, so I worked at Google for 8.5 years. Fantastic job. I loved it so much. But in 2016, that all changed when the wrong president got democratically elected. And the senior executives at Google decided that they were going to put the toothpaste back into the tube of populism and nationalism. And for those of you who haven't seen the all-hands meeting that they had about a week after the election, Google said some really inappropriate things. And Breitbart leaked the video, but what most people skip past, which was actually the most important part of this video, was a question by one of the Google employees to Sundar Pichai. And the question was, what was one of the most effective things that Google did during the 2016 election? And his answer was that they had used machine learning in order to censor the fake news. And I remember sitting at my really comfortable desk at YouTube, which Google owns, and thinking to myself, wait a minute, we're censoring fake news? Isn't the mission statement of Google to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful? How does that fit into a reality when we are deciding what's fake news and what's real news and then censoring it? And so this started a very long rabbit hole that I started to go down. And like Kerry here, I would consider myself a leftist for my entire life, like bordering socialist, more like a classical liberal, really. But as I started to untangle why Google was censoring fake news and the system that they were using to censor the fake news, there's also a personal story of my deconstruction, as I realized that everything that the media was saying was kind of contrived and kind of a social construct. And once you really kind of get that and you start seeing it everywhere, you start realizing that, well, I'll just be honest, there's a foreign intelligence operation operating within the United States that's pumping our soft minds with propaganda. And their secret weapon is that the people don't know that this is actually happening. And so we don't have to get guns, we don't have to stage an insurrection. All we have to do is give people the truth. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show everyone what I saw as a full-time employee. And what I saw was really eye-opening. And so that's why I came to Project Veritas. They were the best outfit to be able to deliver this story to you, the American public. And I really got to thank James O'Keefe for that. Like, the whole company is a reflection of his integrity. And, thank you, James.
Maybe just say a few words about that right after you were either terminated or blew the whistle, law enforcement came and did, if you're comfortable saying something to that effect, just the retaliation and how you overcame that.
Yeah, so I remember calling up James and saying, hey, Google's getting a little hot with me. They're like sending a really high-profile law firm after me to destroy my finances. And if I end up dead, then you could just take all 950 pages and leak it to the public. And then I went on Twitter and I posted pretty much the same thing. In fact, it's in my book right here. First chapter, you'll see the tweet. It's got a picture of a guy who's about to be killed by a dragon, but in the last movie, he's like thrusting a dagger into its heart. And I say on this tweet, in the event of my untimely death, all records will become public domain. 30 minutes later, I've got police at my house. And I'm like, I'm not gonna answer the door, right? Because they don't know that I'm there. And instead of going away and like just going back wherever, they decided to escalate, and they also like saw something in my house, and they're like, let's just say this is a bomb. And so they escalated to a bomb threat, and that means they had to call in like the FBI and the SWAT team, and they had to like shut down the roads, start evacuating people, my neighbors.
Can't make this up.
Yeah. I realized that this was going on because I was like, why are the helicopters flying really low to my house? And there was like one, and then there was like two, and I'm like, okay, this is not a coincidence. I think they're here for me. And then my best friend actually like came over and saw all these police, and he's like, are you guys here for Zach Voorhees? And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm the guy who can get him out. Totally blew my cover. And so the standoff ended with me coming out. And they detained me. They asked me like whether I wanted to harm myself or whether I should be on drugs or whether, whatever. And then at the end, they revealed that Google had done this by saying, well, why would Google call this wellness check on you? And I said, aha, I knew it. It was Google the entire time. So yeah,
and thank you, and thank you for sharing that. And we have the pictures, if you don't believe it. I have pictures of law enforcement showing up to his house after the leak. Speaking of Kafkaesque government intrusion, in none of which you would believe unless it was on video, I'm going to move to Hopkins here because I've seen a phenomenon happen as Veritas does this work. In the beginning, the oppressor comes after these brave souls, but the problem is by doing that, we publicize what they're doing. In the 20th century, whistleblowing was different because there was no outlet. You had Cronkite and then Jennings, and you had limited distribution. But now, in the digital era, you have this sort of populist citizen brigade, millions of people. So they don't want it to be publicized that they come after it. And has Google sued you?
Oh,
Has CNN sued you? None of these people have been sued because they don't want to bring attention to the disclosures. So, but the arc of the moral universe is long. We go to Richard Hopkins in the Postal Service, and I'll just say a few words before Richard talks. Richard, he's such a good man that when we went to interview him, on the record, as a postal worker, he overheard his supervisor supposedly backdating a ballot, which is a federal crime, November 3rd or 4th, November 5th, 2020, right before the election. He was so concerned that he was delivering his mail on his route, and he couldn't even take 5 minutes to stop working. So you got to interview him while I'm delivering the mail. So that's a word about that, and I think maybe if you could talk about the experience. He blew the whistle, went public, current postal worker, November 5th, 2020, got 10 million views on YouTube and Twitter. It was #1 trending story on Twitter. The Office of the Inspector General, former FBI agent, flew in from New York to Erie, Pennsylvania to interrogate him, not about what he heard, but to try to twist him and coerce him to change his story. Thank God Richard Hopkins was recording that interaction. Because I don't deal in conspiracy theories. I only report anything if you can see the person's lips moving. So if you could speak a little about that, what you were told and how you felt.
Well, I mean, like with the situation at the post office, I'm sitting there just casing off my mail, not minding my own business. I'm like one of the last ones in the office anyways. And I watch my supervisor and my postmaster go right behind my freaking case. They start talking, and I hear freaking the postmaster go, "You guys made a mistake, man. You should have. You got one that's got the 4th instead of the 3rd. I was off the day before on the 4th, and this is the 5th, and I'm overhearing this, and I'm like, what?" and I knew that if I came out, they were going to know it was me, because I literally looked my postmaster in the eyes as I go, "What?" Because they're literally talking about backdating these ballots. Mind you, they were going around the office stating, all ballots have to count. We have to go out and get these last bits of ballots. They all need to count. Yeah, that's already bothersome, but then you overhear your boss talking about this. I truly do not believe that my postmaster was working of his own volition. I think this is something that came from way above his head, and we were seeing it all across the country. I was not the only postal worker that was seeing it. I was just one of the first ones to come out about it. And about the investigators, they put me in a little itty bitty room. I'm not even kidding you. It was like being in a jail cell with 3 investigators. 2 of them were freaking postal police, and one of them was this OIG, Russell Strausser. And I'm sitting there like, I'm around him. I'm a little freaked out. And he was a damn good salesman. He could sell you a pen for $50, I swear to God. But, yeah, it was a wild ride, and I'm just lucky that I happened to be recording that day.
And what did he say, the quote that, I don't know if we have it in the video, or we do a speech next show, but the quote heard around the world from Russell Strasser, former FBI agent turned Office of the Inspector General. What did he say to you in your interrogation?
I'm not trying to twist you, but I'm trying to twist you to get your mind working, right? I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm going to scare you. It didn't make any sense, but at the same time, it's like, mind you can ask James over here. They can't find the man now. He just disappeared.
Just disappeared. We usually try to confront these people, and this guy's, like most spooks, he just disappears off the face of the earth. And what was remarkable about the situation was that you recorded this interaction, including this quote, "I'm trying to scare you and twist you so your mind could kick in." I don't have to write fiction. I could just quote what people tell me at Project Veritas. It beats any, Huxley novel out there. And the reality was, the Washington Post did an article after this 2-hour interrogation that you recorded, quoting anonymous sources about who are these anonymous sources when you actually recorded the interaction. The anonymous source would have had to have been the man interviewing you.
Exactly, and I honestly, I told James, I didn't want them to post the video yet. I didn't know what they were going to do, but as soon as that Washington Post article came out, I was like, drop the bomb on them, screw them. Because I was trying to be fair with this whole situation. I mean, I'm just a normal guy. I was a former Marine. I did from 07 to 2012. And then, like most military guys, I got out and I was like, man, I just want to go back. And so I went to the Army National Guard in Texas, and I did 4 more years of that. And then I ended up moving to Pennsylvania for ungodly reasons. Terrible decision. Now I'm in Tennessee, people, so hey, I'm happy.
So yeah, it really was amazing because that Washington Post article came out citing, quote, people familiar with the matter. You should have been in our office. You were with me that night when that happened. I was in a state of shock. I mean, people familiar with the matter? Well, there's one person familiar with the matter, and he was interrogating you, and we recorded him. So who are these people familiar with the matter? I mean, and the Washington Post gets on, Anderson Cooper goes, well, credible sources, Anderson, say that he recanted. Well, who are these sources? So what you begin to realize is the Washington Post is credible by virtue of their own decree that they are indeed credible. because they're reporting facts that run contrary to irrefutable videotaped evidence. So this is the world that we're living in. Again, I would say it's like 1984, but I think we're beyond 1984. It's some other world. And the only solution are people like this, because they have the power to crush the narrative. And that leads us to the world of television. As a result of the disclosures made, we've had some brave TV people come out working in journalism. April Moss, journalist and meteorologist from CBS Detroit. Talk a little bit about why you chose to go public while currently employed at CBS News. You've interviewed some pretty big names, and the governor of Michigan, some other people that you've interviewed. Who's the anchor from CBS that you would?
Gail King.
Gail King, and you chose to go public and talk about why you did it.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for being here. It really speaks to the fact that you value truth and you value freedom, and you honor us by being here today. So thank you. First, I'll give you a little bit of a background about me. I am a wife and a mother of 4 sons. I've been a meteorologist and a journalist at CBS Detroit for the last 9 years. Always knew that CBS leaned left, but since my primary job was weather, it didn't really concern me very much until COVID hit. And this was really a cataclysmic moment when everybody was sent home to their houses to work, which was mid-March, March 17th. I was one of only about 9 people in the building that were still required to report and continue to go in. And this was, again, early March. We weren't quite sure what this virus was. There was a lot of fear, as many of you know. And so this was a time when truly I was trying to get to the bottom of where did this come from. And just in my nature, I'm a very inquisitive person. And my work emailed me and said, these are 2 documents you must print out, keep with you at all times. They're from the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm thinking, Department of Homeland Security? And I read the letters, and one letter says, the bearer of this letter must be able to purchase gasoline. And the bearer of this letter is an essential employee for media to restore telecommunications. So it was really odd to me that I was receiving these letters, because any logical thinking person would say, well, that's kind of like as if nobody else can get gas. But I need this letter to be able to get gasoline. And so when I asked my boss at work, hey, listen, can you explain these letters from the Department of Homeland Security? As well as I had to have a badge. I had to wear a badge. I had to keep it in my vehicle at all times in case I was stopped by police, they told me. Nobody at work would explain to me this. Nobody. So I began to do my own research, and that's when I discovered a lot of information regarding the higher powers that were behind this whole COVID thing. And as I continue to do some more investigative journalism, just on my own time, I became very knowledgeable in many things. And that brings me to this point here where I said I have to do something, because I'm learning a truth that is not being revealed to the public. And I know many other people are also hearing this information, and they're getting disgusted with mainstream media because they are seeing things online that will never be told to them on the TV screen. And so this one particular day, I was hosting a show that aired on Saturday mornings called Community Connect. And this is just an example of how CBS would enforce their narrative upon just every outlet that they could. And we had a topic of, we were talking about ideas for pitching show guests. And we had a lot of political figures on the show before. And I had said, well, listen, we're always interviewing these left-wing political candidates. Let's get some more conservative, talking points on here to balance things out. Like journalism, we're supposed to be objective. And it was just always a firm no, like absolutely not. And so this one particular show, I had to interview Dr. Joni Caldoun, who was a former Obama administrative health official who was planted in Detroit, Michigan, to help with the vaccine rollout. Now, I'm telling you this because I had done the research on these vaccines. I had been following this very closely, watching the data coming through from CDC. You know, I was like a hawk on this topic. So I was so excited that I was actually going to have the opportunity to interview this woman because I had some questions for her about the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. It became very apparent to me that I was not to talk about vaccines whatsoever when I was interviewing her. Imagine that. I'm supposed to be interviewing a doctor in the city of Detroit, which got hit the hardest, one of the hardest states being hit by COVID, and they don't want me to talk about it whatsoever. So I knew that I had to stay true to just who I am as a person, and I thought, this is disgusting. I can't do this as a journalist and not ask her questions. So I decided that I was just going to ask the questions anyway and go off script. So I asked the producers right before we started taping, I said, tell me what B-roll, which is the video that they were planning on showing during this interview, what B-roll do you have? They said, we're going to show how she just got the vaccine. And I said, perfect, thank you, God. You're lining this up perfectly because now it's absolutely legitimate for me to ask these questions. So that was my very first question off the bat. I wanted to get right to it. Dr. Caldoun, can you tell me about the long-term studies, because we all know there have not been any. Can you tell me about the long-term studies about the safety and efficacy of these vaccines? And she gave me a canned response and said, absolutely. In fact, in clinical trials, we have determined that the vaccines prevent hospitalizations. And I looked at her and said, that's very interesting. Can you please clarify this statement because we know that's not true. And unfortunately, she continued to lie. So I wasn't getting anywhere, and that's when my producer in my ear was saying, get off that question. Move on to the next question. Ask her who inspired her. So this is just a real-life example of the climate, okay, that was working at CBS Detroit. And then, you know, there were multiple phone calls with my producer and my boss, with me basically being very aggravated and saying that this is not journalism. You know, and I can't have my name attached to this anymore. So I refused to do that Community Connect show because I was getting nowhere. And the producer did speak to me afterwards and said, April, why did you ask those questions about the vaccines? That wasn't in this script. And I just flat out told him, I have to be true to myself. And we owe it as a service to the public. That's what we're here for, to protect and be the watchdog.
And I think a lot of people struggle working. I mean, April and Ivory, who we're going to get to in 1 second. You know, we've been so many people within television news. I can't tell you their names. If I did, your mouths would drop. That reach out to me off the record. I would say almost the majority of people are where you are. Whether they have that makes your courage all the more palpable because you do take a risk to your livelihood doing this. April, fair to say you're inspired by what Ivory did.
Absolutely.
And maybe just talk about that for a second. We'll go to Ivory.
Yeah, so, you know, I was already in contact with Project Veritas throughout this time. Did not know that Ivory was also another insider. Project Veritas does an excellent job about really protecting the identity of whistleblowers. And so I would just say this, is that I know that each one of you in this room has somebody that you're connected to, whether it's a mom, you know, a dad, a cousin, you know, a brother, sister, who has connections to media. And if we are to save our First Amendment rights and, you know, continue to preserve freedom in this country, we need to have more whistleblowers come out. And so I'm grateful that Ivory was able to take a stand in such a demonstrative way, which really gave me the courage to say, I can do this too. She just did it last week. I can do this too. Because it is a very unnerving thing to know that you are going to expose your corporation. But if I could just say really quick that we want you to come talk to us. I want you to come talk to me, before this Freedom Fest is over. We would love to help you. This is the beginning of the momentum, but we need you to continue to go to do this, because it's not just up to us, it's up to you. It's up to everybody to help save our country.
I think it was a movie, The Insider, with Al Pacino and Mike Wallace, or the guy playing Mike Wallace, someone's been asking him, who are these ordinary people? And I think the producer, Lowell Berman, said, just ordinary people under extraordinary pressure, compelled to do the right thing. Ivory set this whole thing off with the Fox 26 Houston footage, where she goes on camera on live television. I think, was it live? Was it a live broadcast? And reporting on the Texas heat wave with the broken air conditioning units. And then in the middle of this live thing, tell us what happens and why you chose to do it.
Yeah, in the middle of the live report, I told the viewers that I wanted them to know that Fox Corp has been muzzling me to keep information from them. It's a pattern I saw over the course of the past year, unlike anything I'd seen in my 9-year career in corporate news. And it was quite upsetting to see a narrative push, many facts suppressed, fear shot into the minds of every American, and control take over their lives. People have willingly given away their liberties in this country in the past year, to an extent that I haven't seen my whole life. And propaganda in the media has helped encourage those people to give their liberties away. That was so bothersome to me. And I have the evidence in my own firsthand experience of my bosses forcing me to push this propaganda. And so there came a point where I just wanted as many people as possible to know that this was happening, and I no longer wanted to be used as a tool of propaganda. I wanted out of the corporate media. So that day, I just blurted it out in my live report, and I knew that was a hard page turn in my life, that there was no going back to corporate news, but it was so worth it to me, because I never got into journalism to get to some prestigious place on a TV screen. It wasn't about that to me. It was about freedom for the people. And suddenly, information has always been an empowering tool for people to use to keep themselves free. And suddenly we were doing the opposite of that in the media. We were scaring people into giving away their liberties. So I just called it out on live TV, and then I collaborated with Project Veritas for a few months to record some of what my bosses were doing, and then we put out those recordings, and the rest is history.
And that legacy or that history seems to be how many people reach out to us from within TV news. I mean, I worked with Ivory at my desk, just responding to all the anchors and TV people and people on the fence that are kind of, I don't know if I have the courage to do what you do, but I want to do it. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, every media market in the country, talking to Ivory, talking to me, we hope to give people that courage, and it's just the beginning here. Now, the person who started this whole thing, really, in my opinion, we're going to kind of go right to left, and we're going to end with David. Eric Cochran from Pinterest now is our director. I hired Eric as an employee. He's basically our director of whistleblowing. Eric was a then 25-year-old software engineer for Pinterest, and came to us with some documents showing that Pinterest was censoring pro-life content and censoring and like Zero Hedge. They called it a porn site. Pinterest labeled that as a porn site, and you couldn't type in a Bible verse in the autocorrect. But you would have been a conspiracy theorist, but not for the software engineer going on the record as a current engineer for Pinterest, making a bunch of money, and said some pretty powerful things in the interview with me. Eric said at the time, again, probably our first real whistleblower, he said, "I'm going to fall to ashes one day. I want my life to mean something after I'm dead." These are powerful words. So, Eric, why don't you talk for a couple minutes about your experience?
Thank you. Yeah, so a couple years ago, my life was very different. This was the beginning of 2019, and we were still in the stages where we had, it was the beginning of extreme tech censorship. The election was starting to ramp up, and we still had, there were a lot of people out in the country who said it's a conspiracy theory. Pro-lifers, reactionaries are not getting banned from social media. They're not getting censored. There's no hidden censorship. And I was hearing a lot of this at the end of 2018. And then I noticed at Pinterest, we started building out entire teams for trust and safety and content safety. And I knew that those were kind of code words for removing content that our high-minded San Francisco people didn't like. And then at the beginning of 2019, I started to get a little bit more curious what our teams were working on. I actually worked on our Android app. I was very far removed from the actual censorship, fortunately. I like building apps that people get to use on their phones. But I got more curious at Pinterest what we were actually doing. So I started looking into what measures we were taking for content safety. And fortunately, I actually had a lot of access at Pinterest. I saw that we had a sensitive terms list, which means that these are things that if you post them on Pinterest, they'll get posted, but just people won't really see them. They'll show, you will post them, but when people search for them, they might not see them. They won't show up on people's home feeds. So these were things like Bible verses, Christian quotes, Christian Easter was on there. And at first it actually didn't shock me too much until then I contacted Project Veritas and said, hey, I'm a software engineer at Pinterest. I'm seeing some of this stuff. If this is at all of interest, let's talk. And then when I started talking to actually Spencer Meads, who runs our sources department, I realized that actually that was newsworthy. Actually, that is shocking to people outside of San Francisco in 2019. And then when I looked even further, Pinterest was just going public, was just IPOing. So we were in the process of becoming a big tech company, and so we actually still had a lot of this censorship done on what we had called a pornography block list. So we would add things like Live Action, the pro-life group, Zero Hedge, a few other conservative and pro-life websites to a pornography block list. And it was as I exposed in our chat logs, it wasn't because they thought it was pornography. It was because it was an easy way to get it blocked. Because if we label it as pornography internally, then people can try to post their links to Live Action, but then they'll just get a generic error message like, "Oh, try again later." So I took this to Project Veritas, and then it was a story, in 2019. And of course, now we know that big tech censorship is just, far beyond that. I mean, that Twitter's banned the President of the United States. So what more is to say?
Well, I think when you did that, what was remarkable is that usually in the past, the company would fire the engineer who, did the censorship. They lied to the people. But no. In your case, Veritas published a story. Again, they had put Zero Hedge on a porn site list, and Lila Rose's, pro-life group on the porn, which is insane. But rather than say, sorry, we made a mistake, we're taking it off the list. No. Pinterest doubles down and straight up bans Live Action. from
Right.
Pinterest. So it was bizarre, psychological. We had crossed this Rubicon.
Right. I mean, it forced their hand. It forced them to be public that, they couldn't hide the censorship anymore. They had to publicly say, we want to ban live action. But now Project Veritas is growing. Like James said, it was just me would have been on the stage years ago. And now we have a full collection. This isn't even the full collection of insiders, and we're getting more and more. Our sources team is growing bigger and bigger every day. So if you're on the inside, come find me or email us at veritastips@protonmail.com. And if you're interested in joining the sources team, come find me as well, or email us at veritastips@protonmail.com.
I just want to say about Eric, before we get to David. I like to say about Eric is that he wouldn't ask anyone to do what he himself does not do, and that's what makes him a great leader, and that's what makes people feel safe to come to him, because we've all been through it. Every one of us up here has been through this. Myself undercover from the outside, themselves undercover from the inside, and finally we get to the most recent story that happened just in the last week or so. David Johnson, who is still employed, has not been fired yet. Still employed for Hasbro Toy Company. He has been suspended. Suspended as of, was it Sunday? It was a few days ago?
Yeah, Sunday.
And we have this is sort of breaking news here this morning, a response from this. And what David brought to Project Veritas was information about critical race theory within Hasbro toy companies pertaining to 2-year-olds, 6-month-old kids, and children, training, some of it seemingly mandatory training for Hasbro employees. And maybe just talk about what inspires you to do this, David, and what you exposed, and then we'll talk about the company's reaction this morning.
Sure. So the reason I'm on stage with all of these heroes is because I chose to expose critical race theory being pushed at Hasbro. I chose to do that because critical race theory, if you're not super familiar with it, it wants to pit people of different races against each other in a sort of oppressor versus oppressed mindset. It teaches people who are minorities that no matter what you do, you can't succeed because you exist in a racist system. And it teaches people who are not minorities that no matter what you do, you're oppressing people because of how you were born. And to me, that just goes against everything that Dr. Martin Luther King stood for. That's not what it's not what people in the civil rights era fought and sacrificed for. Our country we've been through that past already. We've overcome it. We've learned to come together as just brothers and sisters, no matter what our backgrounds are. We should be judging people based on the content of our character and our actions. And critical race theory just opposes all of that. And to have them push it on children is just, it's so subversive because they know if you go to they push it in colleges as well, but if you go to most people and say, hey, I want you to judge everyone you're going to come across based on how they look, most people are going to tell you no. But if you push it on children before they're really able to understand what race is as a concept, then they're going to accept that as a worldview and then carry that forward. And I think that's just incredibly harmful for this country.
So, David, you release these tapes, or you give the tapes to me and Project Veritas. These are recordings that you've recorded, and they're talking about 6-year-olds, 2-year-olds, race, critical race theory programs. We published them. Hasbro responds. This response was a few days ago, and the response from the company is to effectively suspend you, but to say, quote, I'm going to read the first, and there's another response this morning, but our mission is to create the world's best toys, blah, blah, blah. As always, the views expressed by external speakers are their own and do not reflect the views of the company. So Hasbro is trying to distance themselves from this mandatory training. Your response to Hasbro?
I said in response to that, well, like I said, I had to attend the meeting because it was on my calendar, but if Hasbro is going to invite third-party speakers, I'm almost certain that anyone they're going to invite are people that they're going to be supporting, because this wasn't even the first time Hasbro has worked with that company, The Conscious Kid. They've made play sets with them before because it seems that critical race theory is something that Hasbro does stand by. So to their first response, I just asked, what is their official stance, and are they prepared to give a yes or no, do you support critical race theory or not?
Now, this morning, The Conscious Kid, what is The Conscious Kid?
The Conscious Kid is an external company from Hasbro, but they're well connected with like the NFL, Google, YouTube, to bring critical race theory in practice at different corporations.
So we'll leave this on the screen here so you can see it. The Conscious Kid posted this morning to Instagram and everywhere else where statements are made, and they said the Conscious Kid responds to false claims. They're saying that by publishing a recording of people talking, we're making a false claim. This is that George Orwell thing we're in again. By Project Veritas. So they're saying that you recorded this training at Hasbro through Conscious Kid was their subcontractor.
Yeah.
They're claiming that this is a, quote, false claim by us. Your response to this statement released today?
I would like to know how showing a video of their own words with them speaking on video is a false statement or is deceptive. I'd like that answer.
Unbelievable. They also said this is really, because this is our attorneys are right now as I speak writing a letter because it says, quote, the group behind the smear campaign. It's a smear campaign to quote people. What is it? Maybe I should, the more accurate I quote them, the more of a smear it becomes. I'm going to read this. This is not fiction. This is nonfiction. Quote: the group behind the smear campaign, Project Veritas, is known for its connections to hate groups with a history of racial violence.
I think more racial violence is the last thing this country needs. But if they're going to keep pushing CRT onto children, they're going to make more of it. I'm almost certain of that.
It's a little bit of, as we say at Project Veritas, they often project onto us precisely who they are. And that is their, we don't do that here. We're moral people, we're ethical people. We don't falsely accuse others of the sins that we ourselves commit. But that's what they do, and they do it effectively. And we're going to have to figure out a way around that. The way around that, I think, is to expose the truth. So we have no time left. I think I'd rather hear from everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get to do the Q&A, but the speaker says we're just about out of time. So maybe just give a round of applause to everyone up here.
Come see us at the booth. We'll be speaking today at 4:30 and showing these videotapes. You know who to call. Ghostbusters, no Project Veritas.